search of a new path, because I planned to study international agriculture, made a 180-degree change mid-degree program, which I don't advise as a path to take. But if you find yourself on that path, you need to find people who can help you along the way. And that I came to Gary because when my interests had returned to domestic agriculture, I reviewed the faculty in the department, and his interest and experience teaching the sustainable agriculture course was what caught my attention. So we had a conversation, and from that, a degree program changed from an NPS to an MS, and I went on for a PhD, and we did a postdoc together, and now I'm teaching at Tufts University, and we still have a paper in review. So from work that has continued after I left Cornell. So it's been a collaboration that has now stretched on for 16 years, and it's been wonderful. So there's a few things I wanted to share in terms of, I've learned many things, but a few things I wanted to focus on, and you'll sense some common themes with what others have said. The first one is that Gary gave me a very strong appreciation of how important field experiences are to students. And not just from CSS 1900, but also from a field course that was offered here a couple times in the summer. It was an agroecosystems field course based in the Midwest. And in 2003, I saw a poster up in the hall and said that there was going to be this course, and I talked to Gary about it because he's the contact person. And to make long short, 8 students, including myself and Gary, drove out to Iowa for a week-long intensive field course that was co-taught by Gary and then faculty from University of Nebraska, University of Minnesota, University of Wisconsin, Iowa State, and Dordt College, which was the host college. And we toured around for a week, keeping a pretty intense schedule. We left after breakfast, went to 2 or 3 field visits, had dinner, then debriefed after dinner. So we usually went till at least 8 at night, and we did that every day. So we all got to know each other pretty well, and it was just a tremendous learning experience. I've only had one other experience in my formal training that was like that. It was a week-long experience in Puerto Rico, and the amount you learn from an experience like that is just unparalleled for the amount of time you spend. So I really am grateful for Gary to opening that experience up for us to participate. And I still have a hope of being able to do a course like that myself, but I haven't found the option to do something that ambitious. I did just this fall have a chance to take some of my own students to the University of New Hampshire dairy, and they had not had a field course like this at all in their graduate training, and we spent 3 very chilly hours in November at this farm, and then went to lunch afterwards because we all needed to warm up. And it was then that I really saw how much they took in. It was just 3 hours of nonstop soaking up knowledge. So I can't emphasize how hammered home that point was by that field experience. And there's a couple of pictures from that trip on the wall over there. So a second thing that I've learned, and it's really since becoming a professor myself, is the quality of the education and the mentoring that I received here. And it's one of those things that I just trusted Gary when I became a graduate student that I was going to learn everything I needed to learn. But then it's in retrospect I've learned how well thought out it was, or at least how well it came together, whether it was well thought out or not. Because that's another thing I've learned while you're teaching. You have to do a lot of improvisation. And there are several things I wanted to mention. So one is having the chance to co-teach 190 with Jane, which in 2003, I TA'd the class before, but in 2003, Jane and I co-taught it before I was on sabbatical. And I had the chance to take over running the lab section. And it's just a tremendous amount of effort that goes into planning a lab session. And I used some of the exercises that Gary already did, so I had a running start. But it was a wonderful experience and left me so much better prepared to step into a classroom position when I started my own job at Tufts in 2010. Another few things, I'll mention some of the big ones, was a successful NRI grant. NRI is a dinosaur term now. It's now the Agriculture Food Research Initiative. But Gary and I applied for a grant together when my funding source was starting to dwindle. And we successfully put together a proposal. And it was my first experience working on a grant like that. And now I can't imagine not having done graduate school without having that experience, because the expectation is that you will write things when you become a faculty member, so you have to know this. And I didn't realize how quickly it came together, but having written proposals now afterwards, I can't believe it put together in 4 weeks. It was amazing. Then there are just the other things that you must encounter as a graduate student. So he encouraged me to join a professional society and to regularly attend the Tri-Societies meetings, which I did. And he nominated me for an award, which I won, the Mott Award, which was a really wonderful award. And attending the project director meetings for a USDA grant, which I didn't realize how important they were to go when you realize, okay, this is a key way for people who don't necessarily know each other to create new collegial relationships. And then also always having an open door as I had questions along the way with my degree program. And sometimes you couldn't talk to me right away, but it was almost always the same day. And now that I've had to be in the driver's seat of mentoring students, I realize, one, how much time it takes to do a good job mentoring students, and how hard it is to do it all in the moment when students have questions that come up. Your brain is in some other space sometimes, and you need to bring it back to them. And Gary has always modeled that, and he also modeled good work-life balance, which is something that is rare in jobs in general, and certainly rare in academics. Because it's hard to do. The job has so many dimensions, it's hard to draw clear bounds. So I continue to realize how good a mentor I had as time goes on. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about were just some of the things about science and sustainability that I learned from Gary, some of which I quote in class now. And I quote is probably too strong a word because they're probably paraphrases of what you actually said, but I'll offer a couple of aphorisms. One was on teaching, and so I'll read what I think Gary said. So we want to teach students how to think critically, but the problem is, the more you know, the better you think. So there's always this trade-off between how do you learn how to think through a problem, and when are you actually limited by how much you know and understand? And my students who come from a wide range of disciplinary backgrounds are very willing and ready to jump into the critical thinking, but they don't always come equipped with some of the basics. So I find myself taking a step back to cover the basics, and I feel very confident in that because this aphorism has definitely proven true for me. Another one, which is on modeling, is that modeling is done for two reasons. One is prediction, and the other is to understand how a system works and to learn what you don't know. And I now teach a course, it's in its third iteration, or third offering, not its third iteration, called Food Systems Modeling. And this is something I've tried to impart on my students because they come in with a clear idea about the prediction piece, but not a very clear idea about how you learn by doing. And so I'm able to say, you don't have to just listen to me. I'm going to quote somebody who has more experience than I do, and I know that he's right on this. I incidentally found a reading that says the same thing, so I've got it backed up from multiple directions. It is true. And very underappreciated by non-modelers, I should say. Third thing I want to say about sustainability has to do with systems thinking and forages. And I'll say just a little bit about my own research that Gary and I collaborated on, which started with my master's work looking at could New York State feed itself, and coming up with a spreadsheet-based simulation model to answer that question, looking at the land requirements of people's complete diets and looking at a different range of meeting those diets. Well, that has proven to be a very fruitful thread of work as it continues on for me to this day. But at the time when I started, I definitely had the bias that the plant-based diet is the one that's going to have the least impact on the environment. And there, in a general way, there's a lot of truth to that statement. But the piece that I didn't appreciate well enough was the forage piece, and how livestock fit into a sustainable system. Another aphorism is, nature doesn't farm without animals. And not only is that true, but the piece that the forages fill is that so much of the land we use for agriculture is not suitable for continuous cropping. And some of it isn't suitable for cropping at all. And understanding how those grazing systems or pasture systems or forage systems play that role is something that Gary gently tried to nudge me to appreciate, and it made it into that work. And what's really interesting is that it's just become sort of more fascinating to me as time has gone on. A couple of small asides. One was doing a paper on the livestock requirements, or feed requirements of livestock and land requirements of livestock. I spent a lot of time pondering how much forage do the different grazing systems around the country produce. And then other things that are just kind of cool about forages. The seasonality of growth, the fact that they are perennial polycultures, which is something in sustainability and agroecology is talked about as being the ideal. Well, they're already there. That they interact with livestock in interesting ways. And one of the most recent research project I have now is on grass-based meat systems in the Northeast. So the lesson stuck. And I thought you
That's
should
really
know
good.
The other piece of that is that it's a systems project that involves an economist, an animal scientist, and an architect, in addition to a crop and soil scientist. So that lesson of trying to build really transdisciplinary teams has also stuck. So a couple of closing thoughts. One of the neat things that I've learned about teaching is that you begin to appreciate the wisdom that was passed down to you, which includes those aphorisms. Another thing is that I've modeled some of my own teaching after what Gary does, using some notes, even if I don't give them to students, they're handouts for myself on what's the structure of what I expect students to learn. So when it comes time to give an exam, you know what you expected them to learn. and hopefully, if they didn't get it, then you have a conversation. And I've been in those conversations that Jane mentioned where that question could have been worded better. And I followed the example of being gracious and admitting when you're wrong. So with that, for all of that, I'm grateful. So I want to say thank you, Gary, for your time, your help, your lessons, and the continuing relationship that we've had. And to wish you a happy and a healthy retirement.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.